Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brittany. I am APSIA's Constituent Relations Coordinator. It's so great to have everybody here today to talk about the Payne, Pickering, Rangel, and Foreign Agricultural Service Fellowships administered out of Howard University. I'm so sorry. I need a little bit of water. Yeah. Today we are so lucky to welcome Nye and Lily back to APSIA to chat with our advisors in the PISA network. And whenever you're ready, Nye, I'm so happy to pass it over to you to introduce yourself and chat with our advisors today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany. Quick introduction. Hey, hi, hello, everyone. My name is Nashir Alim Jules. I'm the Deputy Director for the USAID Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship Program administered by Howard University. I'll allow my boss to introduce herself.
Thank you, Nye. Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Lopez McGee. I currently rejoined the Howard University team in the diplomatic fellowships space, where I oversee all of the programs that we're about to talk to you about. I previously worked as the director for the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program and deputy director for the Rangel program. And I am very excited to chat with you all a little bit about the opportunities that we have for your students. I did just want to emphasize that this is intended to be something of a learning opportunity for you. So please ask questions, make this as helpful for you as possible. We'll be monitoring the chat, but you're also welcome to use the raise hand feature at any point for it. It's a lot of information, so please do pause this if you'd like to clarify something that we're talking about. Excellent. So one of the things that we like to chat a bit with you all about before we get into the details about what each of the programs entails is talking a little bit about the Foreign Service. All of the programs that we're going to discuss today ultimately culminate in a career as a U.S. diplomat. What agency our fellows end up at will depend on the programs, and we'll tell you a little bit about the differences between the programs and the agencies in a bit. But I did want to give you just a brief overview of what the Foreign Service is and what it is that we're really talking about when we are discussing these graduate fellowship programs in particular. So the information that's on the screen right now for you about the Foreign Service is largely focused on the State Department's Foreign Service. And as you saw from our initial slide, we will also be talking about the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Foreign Services as well. But to sort of launch us, the Foreign Service is essentially the diplomatic corps that makes up the folks who staff our embassies, consulates, and other posts around the world. They are the ones who are responding to crises overseas. They are adjudicating visas and helping people get into the United States for studies. They are also the ones that are conducting American programming about how to engage with the United States, English language programs, all of those really fun and exciting things. They're also the ones that staff the embassy. They're the ones that are sort of the mini CEOs operating the embassies and consulates abroad. So when we are talking about the Foreign Service and these pipeline programs, we really are talking about a hiring trajectory into the U.S. diplomatic corps. So the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service operates in over 270 different posts. That includes consulates and embassies in different countries. There are only 2 countries in the world where we don't have active diplomatic engagement, and that is in Iran and North Korea. Otherwise, the State Department is everywhere else. And you'll note, and I'm sure and I will talk about this a little bit with differentiating between the Payne program. USAID operates in fewer countries, in large part because the work that the USAID Foreign Service conducts is a little bit more focused, a lot more community oriented and capacity building and training. And we'll share with you a little bit more about what it is that we're looking for students and the individuals who are applying to our programs and how to distinguish which career track might be best for them. So I will turn it over to you, Nye, which I think will lead us into the Payne program.
Yes, thank you, Lily. All right. So the first fellowship opportunity that we're going to present today is the USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship Program. The Payne Fellowship Program, again, is administered by Howard University under a cooperative agreement with USAID. The purpose of the fellowship is to recruit and select bright minds for a career serving in USAID's Foreign Service, which is unique to the agency and vastly different than the Department of State's Foreign Service. USAID Foreign Service officers apply their technical knowledge, their program design, management, and evaluation expertise to promote and demonstrate democratic values abroad and advance a free, peaceful, and prosperous world. Foreign Service officers work with a diverse range of colleagues in environments that can be unfamiliar and also uniquely challenging. What's unique about the U.S. Agency for International Development in particular is the career tracks in which our fellows, in which their development officers essentially enter into. The USAID, the agency has a number of different backstops, which are their technical career tracks. So, for example, we have a need for agricultural officers, economists, engineering officers, natural resources and environment, public health, education, humanitarian assistance, contracting officers, financial management officers, executive officers, et cetera. So there's a number of different technical career tracks for students with various interests, be it in agriculture, business, international affairs, relations, public administration, et cetera, to find interest with the Payne Fellowship Program due to the unique opportunities with USAID. The Payne Fellowship Program, we have a number of incentives. The first being the largest and the most important being the award of up to $104,000 over 2 years for tuition, fees, living expenses, and also summer internships. That breakdown works out to be up to $24,000 per year for tuition fees. And please note that we have a number of different graduate program partners that also offer additional supplemental assistance to fellows in some cases, which may provide full tuition and coverage in other areas. The fellowship also provides a personal living stipend. This is a direct award to the fellow of $18,000 per year, and then up to $10,000 per year towards 2 summer internships, and that includes housing and round-trip transportation. The Payne Fellows do 2 internships, the first being a domestic internship on Capitol Hill the first summer prior to entering graduate school. So we'll do an orientation, a 1-week orientation with our fellows usually on Howard's campus in Washington, D.C., and then they'll enter and begin their internship on Capitol Hill. And then the Payne Fellows do a second 10-week internship overseas at a USAID mission. So here's, again, one of the differentiating pieces between the fellowship programs. The Payne Fellows, again, go into USAID as it's the sponsoring agency, it's Foreign Service. So they, again, do more technical work in different missions. Where State Department may have the 270 posts, et cetera, the missions within USAID aren't that vast. But they do serve in very similar areas, and in some cases a mission may actually be in fact an embassy. So they'll be working closely possibly with Department of State colleagues and like peers in other fellowships. So how to apply? Biggest thing about the fellowships is, of course, the application package, which we require 2 letters of recommendation, one being from a former professor or faculty member and another from a community leader. We do require all official transcripts from colleges and universities attended. We say this because it's easier than saying where you've only had 6 or so credits, et cetera. best to send them all so we can make the determination. We do also require a personal statement in 600 words or less, so being clear and concise there, detailing the reasons for applying and your interest in foreign affairs development and a commitment to pursue a career within USAID's foreign service. We also require a statement in 400 words or less there of the applicant that indicates their need for financial assistance to continue graduate studies, including an explanation of the financial assistance received during undergraduate studies, overall and education-related debt, and their abilities or plans to pay for graduate school independently. One of the other application components is the FAFSA student aid report. We do require that as well, and typically within the last 2 years, or the most recent one. And in that event, because that is a required document there, it is also best to try to use the statement of financial need to convey what the numbers don't essentially tell. Whatever those numbers in the student aid report, or what they call now the student aid index, it may say one thing, but you may have, the applicant may have expressed financial need due to a number of circumstances being extenuating or otherwise. Yes. Here are some just some quick tips on preparing competitive applications that you can advise your applicants or those that you are maybe thinking of for this opportunity. First and foremost, review the application requirements and ensure their eligibility and prepare to apply. I'm going to talk about eligibility in the next slide. Explain again in that statement of interest that the motivations for applying and identifying in their background, their experiences and skills to be a successful foreign service officer. And again, that interest in the career for USAID, the Agency for International Development. The candidate should be able, excuse me, to demonstrate their academic ability and their rigor in studies. We do provide an opportunity within the application. There's a section for them to list their education, their accolades, their professional associations, awards, honors, etc. Also, obtain strong letters of recommendation. It's one thing to have the dean of the college. It's another thing to have, you know, that community member that you spent, you know, 100 hours working on a project with, you know, writing the letter of recommendation there. So advising them about obtaining the strong letters of recommendation there. Demonstrating the need for financial assistance for graduate school. Again, we do require the FAFSA student aid report. So in that, and as well as the statement of financial need. So really making sure that one, the report is generated before the application deadline, so that there aren't any issues, because all application components should be uploaded before the application deadline. And two, in that statement of financial need, again, communicating or conveying whatever the numbers that are reported in the student aid report can't tell, as well as expressing the need to pay for graduate school and have this assistance, including including all relevant extracurricular, community, and volunteer experiences and highlighted leadership roles. This is important. We want to know who you are. So definitely advise the applicant to brag about themselves. Listing any relevant college, university, professional honors and awards. And again, we have a section for that. And making sure, we cannot stress this, proofreading is paramount, especially as we get to the other fellowships, as they may be of interest to some of the candidates you have in mind, where they may apply to all, being sure that they're intentional about their submission for each individual opportunity. And with that, let's talk about the selection process and eligibility requirements. So for the Payne Fellowship program, again, we review the academic background of the candidate, that being the personal statement, the statement of financial need, the letters of recommendation, community service, looking for their leadership, academic rigor, etc. For eligibility for the fellowship, it is by the application deadline, the applicant, excuse me, should have U.S. citizen, so there must be a U.S. citizen, must possess U.S. citizenship in order to apply to the fellowship. And again, must possess it by the application deadline. They must also have a cumulative 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale. and they must also be looking to enroll in a graduate program at a U.S. institution for the next cycle. That will be fall 2025. For this is our sample, our tentative selections timeline here. We anticipate the application for the Payne Fellowship opening mid-July 2024, so this summer, next month. Late October will be when the application closed. Last year, we closed the 26th of October, so we're anticipating somewhere around that time as well. We'll select the 60 finalists for the fellowship program in early December, usually around the 2nd to the 5th. And then in January 2025, we'll conduct our virtual writing exercise, our virtual interviews, which includes a group dynamic exercise. And then we'll also send out the award notifications and collect the decisions there from those 30 who were notified of the award. And again, that's one important thing. I have not mentioned that. The Payne Fellowship does plan to award 30 fellowships for the next cycle there. We've received a 100% increase, which we're very fortunate and thankful for by USAID about 2 years ago. So we've just selected our 2024 cohort this past January, making our second cohort of 30, and 2025 will be the next there. Again, those selected will come to Howard in May 2025. That's usually late May, around Memorial Day, around Memorial Weekend, Memorial Day there for the orientation, and then they'll begin their congressional internship for that summer, usually concluding around the end of July to like the first week of August there. Quickly, here's just a timeline of the fellowship. So it's missing the first component of the fellowship, but the orientation and the congressional internship will happen for the 2025 fellows again in summer 2025. So that'd be May 2025 will be when they'll come for that orientation, and then they'll begin their congressional internship prior to starting in August 2025, their first year of graduate studies. They'll do their first year from August to May, and then move into their overseas internship at a USAID mission. Each internship experience is different, with fellows tend to work on a variety of different issues and projects in different sections of the missions, usually surrounding work within their respective backstops. And then lastly, they'll return in August, and that should be August 2026, to May 2027 to do their second year of graduate school. And once they graduate from their graduate programs there, they immediately onboard to with USAID into USAID's Foreign Service. Oh, okay, and I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to you, Lily. Or actually pause if there's any questions. I'm not sure if I might have missed it.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Some of the shorter ones I responded to briefly, but we can maybe tackle two of the questions that have come in because these are, I think, top of mind issues. One was about financial aid and whether or not there are thresholds that applicants must meet in order to be eligible for the Payne program. And my comment was, no, there are not any cutoffs per se. However, there is a substantial amount of weight given to the candidate's financial need and their circumstances for needing the graduate assistant, the funding for the graduate award. So if a candidate is not, does not have an expressed need for the graduate awards, they may not get all of the points for the financial need statement. So what does that mean? I'm being a little bit opaque in terms of how I'm describing that. And that's in large part because financial need manifests itself very differently depending on the individual circumstances of the applicant. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and then I'll let Nye chime in as well to share any suggestions that he has about this. But this is kind of across the board for all of the programs. Financial need is a component. of the selections process that our selections panels are considering. We have different cases of the way that need portrays itself. And this is part of the reason why we ask candidates to submit a financial needs statement so that they can describe in more detail what the numbers may not tell. So while Pell eligibility is not required, we do consider sort of where their past need was, what their current need for graduate school is, and sort of what their future need is. So you might consider a candidate who was not Pell eligible, but perhaps chose their institution because they received a merit award or because it was close to home and it was commutable. They didn't have to pay for housing of their circumstances, and perhaps they worked throughout their undergraduate career. They may not on paper have the expressed need for a grant, but they made decisions about the financial investment of their university degree to try to either save up or because they didn't have family support or any number of other reasons, right? So that is one way to express need. Perhaps they made decisions about where it is that they went because they did not have the support from family or their community to pay for university in other ways. It may be that a candidate is now independent of their family and has perhaps gone and done Peace Corps. Where we all know you don't get into Peace Corps to become rich, and that is now the circumstances are coming back to the United States. They may not have a job. Maybe they're applying to the fellowship programs at the time when they are returning to the U.S. from the Return Peace Corps volunteer experience. That is something that may influence their need for graduate school assistance. Another consideration that often comes up is loan burden. There may be candidates who have an extensive amount of loans that they've taken out as a result of pursuing their undergraduate degree and now have an express need because of those loans. So I give a couple of different examples. The important thing is that the candidate is telling us and digging a little bit further than what the numbers are showing, in large part because our selection panel will not be able to assume what the candidate's financial circumstances are just based on what we receive by way of the FAFSA information. And as you all know, the circumstances change pretty quickly, right? During the pandemic, we saw this a lot. We got students whose FAFSA reported one income threshold where they perhaps were not Pell eligible at the time that they filled out the FAFSA form, but now are perhaps their parent lost a job or they are in need. They have that space in the financial need statement to detail some of that. So we do ask for additional complementary information about financial circumstances of the candidate so that they can give us the information about what's going on. So Nai, do you have other comments that you'd want to add?
I believe you summed it up so well. I think that is exactly it there. I was going through the chat. They're going to respond to some of the additional questions.
Okay.
Surrounding
And we'll talk, maybe we'll hold off on the essay questions just for a second so that we can distinguish between the programs, because that will also influence how it is that we direct tips and guidance on the essays a bit. And for your all's sake, we won't go in super detail in large part because all of these programs have a similar structure. And that's a lot to do with the fact that we have built a sort of reputation of administering diplomatic fellowship programs. So many of these programs have been inspired by the earlier programs. So we'll start with the Rangel International Affairs Program. This is one of the State Department funded awards. So the Rangel and the Pickering programs are both opportunities that are funded by the Department of State. They have the same goal as the Payne Fellowship Program and all of the programs, quite frankly, to increase the representation of diverse and excellent candidates in the Foreign Service. For the Rangel and the Pickering programs, the fellows ultimately end up as diplomats in the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service generalist track. And that's becomes important because the generalist track is a very distinct career. As I mentioned earlier, the work that Foreign Service do is often really broad. They have to be prepared to serve in any place around the world. There is a phrase that is often used in the Foreign Service called the needs of the department, the needs of the service. So while Candidates may come in with a regional interest or a language interest. Ultimately, as Foreign Service officers, they could end up in parts of the world where they hadn't initially considered their top priority. So I say all that to say, because we want you all to work really closely with your candidates who are considering applying to these programs, so that they think through whether or not these are the right programs for them, because there is a 5-year service obligation for all of them to serve as a Foreign Service officer. One of the unique things about the Rangel program is that we also have another sub-program that takes place. The two are not directly connected, in that the summer enrichment program does not lead to the graduate fellowship program, but it's a separate program under the same auspices of the award of the grant that we administer. So the Rangel program is divided into 2 different programs. The first one is the Graduate Fellowship Program, which I'll talk about in just a second, and then the Summer Enrichment Program, which we'll start with, just again, because this is one of the smaller programs that is often a pipeline into the graduate level program. So if we go to the next slide. I believe this will be the undergraduate program. So our summer enrichment program is a 6-week in-depth experience for undergraduates who are interested in international affairs. They do not have to have an expressed interest in becoming diplomats per se, but it is a State Department funded grant. So if they are interested in federal service or public service in general, I would certainly encourage them to mention that in their essay statement. The 6 weeks are designed to provide our 15 scholars an opportunity to dig in deep into what international affairs careers entails. So we do spend time at the State Department because they are a grantor, but we do also take them around the Washington, D.C., where they are spending their 6 weeks with us at Howard University to learn more about the different federal agencies that have international components to them, careers in nonprofits, private sector, and all of the other areas where you might imagine there to be an international focus. So the program takes place at Howard. We provide 2 classes worth of credits for Howard University courses. One is on political economics, and the other is on the history of U.S. foreign policy. So they do receive a transcript from Howard University. And then in addition to providing the tuition costs for those 2 courses, we do also provide travel, room and board, and a stipend of $3,300 for the 6 weeks that they are with us. The eligibility requirements are that they have to be U.S. citizens. They have to have a 3.2 on a 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale, and they have to have gained sophomore standing by the time that they are applying to the program. So the summer enrichment program deadline is usually in March, late February, early March. So by that spring semester, spring 2025, they should have accumulated sufficient credits in order to be classified as a sophomore in order to apply. So you can be the scholars can be sophomores, juniors, or graduating seniors and eligible to apply to the program. We really like to highlight this program in large part, again, because there isn't a service obligation that happens at the end. It is one that's intended to be an exposure program. And what I will say is that almost all of our summer enrichment program scholars go on to do things that are internationally focused. There are probably about a quarter to 30% of them that end up in a career as a foreign service officer, either by way of the State Department or USAID. And then the rest of them end up in some other career that's very closely connected with international affairs, oftentimes going on to receive other awards like the PPIA Fellowship, the Fulbright Award, the CLS Language Awards, and many others. We have some really great profiles on our website if you are ever interested in learning about some of the things that they go on to do. So that is our summer enrichment program. If we go to the next slide, we can talk about a bit more about the Rangel International Affairs Fellowship Program. The Payne program is actually modeled off of the Rangel program. So the structure of the Rangel program is almost identical to the Payne program. Our fellows will spend their first summer with us doing an orientation in May, where we orient them to the program as well as to the Foreign Service. And then they go on to do a 10-week internship on Capitol Hill for their summer before they start graduate school. Then they do their first year of their master's program and then complete an overseas internship in between their first and second year of graduate school. And then they enter the Foreign Service in July of the year that they graduate or that they complete their 2-year master's program, and end up all lots of interesting and fascinating things. As with the Payne program, we provide funding towards tuition and mandatory fees. We also provide fellows a living stipend for their award. The amount is exactly the same as the Payne program, up to $24,000 towards tuition per year, and then $18,000 in an individual stipend towards that master's degree program. Now, the distinction for the Rangel and the Pickering programs is that both of these have their internships will be conducted with State Department. So the Rangel Fellows do an overseas internship at an embassy or consulate, which can include any of the ones, any of the 270 some odd posts that are around the world. That are willing to host them, and they are then they go into the State Department Foreign Service with that 5-year service obligation at the end. The degrees that we can fund are a little bit more restricted than the degrees that Payne program can fund, in large part because our foreign service with the State Department is much broader. So we are looking at broad degree programs like public policy, public administration, business administration, regional studies, social work. If a candidate is interested in going into consular work, social work is now an approved program as long as it has an international component to it. So if a candidate is interested in talking more about those types of programs, we have a list of sort of pre-approved types of programs that we would fund. Programs that we are not able to fund include law degree programs. We are not able to fund more technical degrees. So, for example, we are not able to fund urban planning degrees. But if a candidate is interested in public policy and they want to do a focus in urban planning, international urban planning, that is certainly something that we could consider. So that is a bit about the structure of the Rangel program. If we go to the next slide, I think we dig in a little bit more into the details about the components. Yep. So the eligibility requirements for the fellowship program, exactly the same. U.S. citizenship, cumulative GPA of a 3.2 on a 4.0 scale. They have to demonstrate to us that they have the intention to enroll in graduate school. So we ask them for the list of graduate programs that they're planning to apply to. If during the application process somebody lists a program that we will not approve, we will often reach out to them and say, "Hey, are you sure you meant this? Did you mean this for something else?" Type of thing. And again, it does have to be in an area of relevance to the State Department's Foreign Service. Candidates can be graduating seniors, or any time after they've graduated and conferred their undergraduate degree, they are eligible to apply. I will say that if a candidate has already received a graduate fellowship program, graduate degree, they do become less competitive in the application process, because this is really intended to open access to graduate programs. So if we go into the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the award. I mentioned the amount of the award. As with Payne, we have developed partnerships with other graduate institutions who provide additional supplemental funding for fellows who attend their programs. And we do have a list of those programs that have offered additional funding. I do want to clarify that that list is not the only graduate programs that fellows can attend. If fellows find another program at an institution that is not on that list, we will consider it, as long as it's in line with the degree of requirements that we're looking for, that it's a 2-year US-based master's degree program in an area of relevance of the Foreign Service. So if we go to the next slide, I think, yes. So one of the distinctions for the Rangel program, there are some obligations that we require of our fellows. They have to have the clearances. They have to maintain a 3.2 GPA throughout the course of their program. And then they have to meet the service entry requirements and serve a 5-year service obligation at the end. The State Department, for our Foreign Service generalists, has one additional clearance that the other agencies do not, and this is called suitability clearance. And for you all as advisors, as you're talking to candidates who are interested in applying to the programs, we really would encourage you to talk to them candidly about the security and suitability clearance requirements of all of the programs. So all of our fellows have to get a top secret security clearance. And I know APSIA does some great programming on understanding the clearance process. So a little plug here for Brittany and her team for that webinar that'll, I'm sure, come up again soon. And then they do have to have a medical clearance, which just means that they have to receive the clearance from the medical unit that they can serve overseas at the posts where they could end up being. And then meet the suitability clearance. And the suitability clearance is an interesting one. It's one that's a little bit less, it's a little bit more murky than the top secret security clearance. The top secret security clearance is, can you keep a secret? Or is it possible that you could be bribed into releasing state secrets? That's how I like to talk about it with applicants. The suitability is a little bit different because U.S. Department of State Foreign Service officers are the representatives of U.S. foreign policy abroad. They have to meet a little bit of a different threshold of sort of suitability to serve as a diplomat. So oftentimes the two biggest reasons that individuals are not able to secure a suitability clearance is either drug use, specifically marijuana use, in large part because marijuana is still considered a Class 1 federal felony. I can't remember the terms exactly, but it is still something that you could be declined a suitability clearance for. So if they have used within the last year, we often encourage them to stop immediately and come back to us in 18 months to 2 years after that. You cannot claim indiscretions of youth for marijuana use if you used it last week. As you're talking to candidates, really consider that. The other big thing that comes up with clearances is often financial mismanagement. So not that students or candidates cannot have financial obligations by way of loans and that kind of thing, but it's more, how have you managed it? Are you in collections? Are people having a hard time getting a hold of you to make repayments? All of those types of things are things that may come up during the suitability clearance. So I want to be candid with you all because this is a topic that we have to talk about very, I think, openly with candidates as they're coming through the application process. And if there is an individual or candidate that has some questions about that, we're happy to talk to them directly about it to give them a little bit more guidance and feedback. So those are some of the obligations, and this is the same for the Pickering program, just for context. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the timeline for the fellowship process is not so dissimilar from the Payne program. We currently, so the way that our grants work is that we can't update the dates until we get the new grant. So this is why last year's dates are on here. But I do, the timeline is very similar. Our application will open this summer. Candidates will be able to submit their applications in early September. And then we will go through an interview and writing exercise process for the Rangel program this year. It will be in November, and the Pickering program will be in December. We will interview 90 candidates during that period, and then we will select fellows in early December, which means that for Rangel and Pickering, both of the programs will notify folks about their award status before the end of the year, oftentimes before graduate schools have their application deadlines. After that, we go through a series of onboarding activities, and then in May, we start them off with a intensive orientation and their congressional internship. And then they do their first year of grad school, do their overseas internship, finish their second year of grad school, and then enter the Foreign Service. They are off to become diplomats. So that's a bit about the timeline. If we go into the next slide. I just wanted to give you just a brief profile of a fellow, Zerlina Bartholomew, fantastic young person who came into the program as a 2019 fellow. She came from the University of Louisville, graduated with her MPA degree from Syracuse University, and has gone on to become a public diplomacy officer in the State Department. She also received a Fulbright to Morocco. We have a number of fellows who have been successful in receiving Fulbright awards I will say that the Fulbright program is the Fulbright ETA and Scholars Program. The research programs are the only reasons why the State Department would give a deferral request or approve a deferral request for a Rangel or a Pickering Fellow. So Zerlina did have a deferral, and she just joined us in the next class of the fellows. So she's lovely. If you'd like to see her snapshot, it's up on the website to learn more. So if we go into the next slide. I think we can maybe jump through here because I know that we have several questions that have come in. We've talked a little bit about the congressional internship process and the graduate school degree. If we go into the next slide, I think we'll talk a little bit about the overseas internship. Suffice it to say that both of the internships are organized in a way to try to give exposure to our fellows about the relationship between Congress and foreign policy, and then two, an overseas internship experience at an embassy or post so that they have an appreciation for what it is that they're walking into as fellows. The one thing that I will say for the Rangel Fellowship Program, our Rangel Fellows select their career tracks. There are 5 career tracks for the Foreign Service, the State Department Foreign Service: public diplomacy, management, consular, political, and economic. Our fellows don't have to choose their career track until after they've completed their overseas internship, which gives them a lot of time to speak with their mentors and their colleagues to compare which career track is the right one for them. If you all are at all familiar with the traditional way of coming into the Foreign Service, there is a Foreign Service officer test that everybody has to take. And you have to choose your career track at the time that you're taking that test. For our fellows, they have time to do that. Our fellows do have to take the Foreign Service Officer test, and then they do have to take and pass the oral assessment. But our Rangel and our Pickering Fellows do have up until their 5-year service commitment is done to pass the Foreign Service Officer oral assessment. Okay, if we go into the next slide. You can go ahead and onto the next slide, Nye. So application materials, exactly the same as the Payne program: personal statement, a statement of financial need, 2 letters of recommendation, one from a faculty or instructor, community leader, someone who can talk sort of more holistically about the candidate's interest in the foreign service and professionalism, proof of U.S. citizenship, their student aid report from the FAFSA, transcripts. As with the Payne program, we're asking for all of them. So if they took a couple of classes at a 2-year institution or studied abroad, we want to see the grades for those. So if those grades are not reflected on their home institution's transcript, they do need to be reflected elsewhere. And then the GRE and GMAT scores are totally optional. They do not have to upload them, but they can if they'd like to. We can go to the next slide. All right, so let's dig in a little bit to the differences between the program. I'm not going to tell you all about the program again, because the Rangel and the Pickering programs are, if you have a candidate that's interested in one, you should just have them apply to both. The important thing here is check those essays, because the too often candidates who are applying to both or all 3 will forget to go back and change the program that they're applying to, which is lack of attention to detail. One of the things that our Foreign Service officers are very keen to, so make sure that those are reflected there. The core difference between the Rangel and the Pickering program is where and when that first internship takes place. So our Pickering Fellows do a domestic internship, 10-week domestic internship at the Department of State in Washington, D.C., in between their 1st and 2nd year of graduate school. And then they go on to complete their overseas internship after they've completed their graduate degree program. And then they enter the Foreign Service the fall after they complete their overseas internship. So again, the timing of when that first internship takes place and the location of that internship are the core differences. Everything else is exactly the same as the Rangel program. So if we go into, I think we can probably skip over the next couple of slides, which might be just a little bit more detail about the specifics for Pickering. I'll just tell you a little bit about the application process itself. We flip-flop the dates for we always joke around who's going first this year in terms of which application submission comes first. Usually they're within a week of each other. So this year we expect the Rangel program to be around September 19th, and the Pickering program to be around September 26th, which is the following week. So they happen within a week of each other, and then the interview process happens within 2 weeks of each other. And it is possible for a candidate to be selected as a finalist for both programs. It's even possible for a candidate to be selected as a finalist for all three programs of Rangel, Pickering, and Payne. And the general guidance is that they have to choose whichever one offers it to them first. So if they are applying this year, Rangel will go first. If they are offered a Rangel Award, they have to make that determination if they want to accept. If they decline it outright, and they cannot come back and claim it later. We will offer it to another person on that list. That doesn't usually happen with the Pickering program, the Pickering and the Rangel programs. If they get one, usually they'll accept the first one that they get. Now, if they did not, if they were not successful in the first round of interview processes, they can still interview for the next award. So I do just want to emphasize that the selection panels are also different, so they're not being reviewed by the same people. And I think if we continue to go forward, maybe a couple more. Yeah, we'll make sure that you have access to these slides so that you can see the differences between them. Okay, so those are the State Department programs. There is one other program that we would be remiss not to mention during this process. It is one of our smaller awards, but it's a small but mighty award. So our USDA colleagues, the Department of Agriculture, also have a Foreign Service arm to their work. It's called the Foreign Agricultural Service. So we offer a fellowship program very similar in terms of structure to the Pickering program, to all of them, where we provide funding towards a 2-year master's degree program and 2 internships that ultimately culminate in a career as a foreign service officer with the Department of Agriculture. A couple of key things to note. The graduate degree programs that we fund for this FAS fellowship program are much more technical. They include agribusiness as well as agricultural studies. They do have to be 2-year master's program. The funding is exactly the same as the other programs, and they do also do their domestic internship before they begin their graduate studies. So the timing of this particular award is the same as the Rangel and the Payne program in terms of timing. The difference is where they do their internship. So the department, the Foreign Ag Service fellows do their internship at the Foreign Ag Service headquarters here in Washington, D.C. And then they do their overseas internship at the locations where the USDA has their presence. And for the USDA Foreign Service, the locations where our Foreign Service agriculture folks go are much smaller even than the USDA, than the USAID Foreign Service. And that's in large part because they operate in sort of regional hubs. So there are fewer locations where they serve. They also serve for longer periods of time. Our Foreign Ag Service fellows, after they complete their degree, will essentially, their 5-year service obligation will essentially be one tour, because their tours will last between 4 and 5 years. And then they have a year of training. So again, this one is much more technical. We're looking for folks who have ag backgrounds and who are interested in studying and pursuing a degree in agriculture for their master's degree program. So if we go to the next slide, I think that might be, yeah. So the timeline for this one, again, we're still refining the timeline for this one. We're working out the details with our colleagues at the USDA, but the application will close in late fall, and we will select finalists likely around the same time or similar in time as the Payne Fellowship program. And then we will do an assessment in January that will include a group exercise and a writing component as well as an interview. And then we will select fellows in the springtime. And as I mentioned, this is a much smaller cohort. We expect somewhere between 2 and 4 awards to be awarded each year for this particular group. So what we do with our Foreign Ag Service fellows is that they are often embedded with our other programs. So they often do our professional development that we do with our Pickering and Rangel fellows in the summer. We'll integrate them into those opportunities so that they're also starting to network with other folks who will end up in the service. Okay, I think that may have taken us to the end, and we can come into some of the questions that I think will actually get into some of the tips and suggestions. So Nai, I know you've been tracking them a bit. Do you have an idea of where you'd like to start with the questions?
Yes, there was one, you touched on it a little bit with regards to the Fulbright in the earlier piece, Lily. I have it here. Give me 1 second.
Oh, about the timing. Yes.
Yes,
Um,
for the Fulbright here in the
Yeah,
chat.
so the timing of the Fulbright ETA will depend a lot, and we generally work really closely with folks who are completing their Fulbrights to determine what would be possible. If the timing we've done a couple of different things. We have worked it out where the fellow comes back just for orientation, so that they can do orientation with their cohort and then they go back to finish the obligations of their Fulbright ETA. We have also had cases where they've deferred the beginning part of the programs, whether that's for Rangel and these are, let me just clarify, this is for Rangel and Pickering specifically. Payne, I think, operates in a different way with deferrals. But with Rangel and Pickering in particular, we usually try to accommodate what we can with deferring the components to align with the timing. Now, if their program ends in late June, we would encourage them to just come back for the 1 week of orientation so that they can at least meet their colleagues in their cohort and then go back to complete their obligations. But we can certainly talk one-on-one with candidates as they're looking to during the application period as well.
Yeah. There's another question in the chat that I'm actually answering. Thank you, Jenna. So the question about the writing exercise and how it functions in the evaluation process. So for, I believe this question came in at the Payne Fellowship. So for the Payne Fellowship, much like the others, we do have a virtual selections process. So the entire process for our applicants is virtual. That includes the writing assessment, which is a virtual timed and human proctored writing assessment. We have a system for that piece. The Payne Fellowship has a separate panel that evaluates and assess for content and grammar. The finalists, the 60 finalists, as all 60 finalists participate in that virtual writing assessment there. And from there, those scores from the writing panel are sent to the final round interview panel for final consideration after the group dynamic exercise and their final round interviews and deliberations. It is in the total score there that the final interview panel deliberates and chooses the 30 Payne Fellows. And then I think there was a question also very specific to Payne with regards to the second part of that was how much control do the students have over their placements for the USAID missions for their second internship. So unfortunately, USAID handles all of the overseas mission placements directly. There's no preferences in consideration there because there are a number of different considering factors for the Payne Fellows for their overseas internships, and some include safety, the mission's ability to accommodate said fellow, because the mission does provide the lodging and accommodations while the fellow is at post there during that 10-week experience. And then also there must be some substantial amount of work for the fellow to do within their respective backstop that will be accessible for them as an intern. So because of those hosts of things there, it is easiest when USAID does handle the overseas placements for the Payne Fellows. But our fellows, we do collect their resumes, and they do speak about the work that they're passionate about in their cover letter there, so that way as USAID starts to work on the placements, and again considering all of those factors, especially safety, especially the mission accommodations for the fellow, etc., they can match them up with a mission that also is doing something similar to the passions of the works that the fellow express. Yes, I also see there's a question here from Brittany. What do you recommend for recruiting students to these very specific opportunities? What type of students typically fit the profile and for these awards, and have a clear plan for both graduate study and government work after? It's a good question, Brittany. So I think the opportunities are unique to everybody. Again, the purpose of all of the fellowship opportunities, not just Payne, is to increase underrepresentation in the foreign service of these respective agencies. And for us, diversity comes in many different shapes and forms, including geographical diversity, as well as financial diversity, as well as ethnic diversity as well, right? Typically, yeah, I would say it really would depend upon the passion and the interest of the prospective applicant. For you all, if you know candidates and recruiting them to the opportunities, right, they should really just be intentional and have at least an interest in some of the work that one of the respective sponsoring agencies does. So in the case of USAID, they should have an interest in development, right? They should have an interest, be it in development, it's loosely and vague, but be it public health, be it agriculture, be it environment. Again, there's a number of different career opportunities within USAID for there. So as long as one of their passions or their interests speaks to the work that USAID does, then they would be a good place, a good candidate to apply to the fellowships. In case in point to those interested in State Department, even more so for those interested in the USDA, Foreign Agricultural Service. Lily, is there anything you would add to that for that question?
I would add a couple of brief comments related to that. And I think this is where you all have a really good opportunity as advisors to have these candid conversations with candidates about alignment with what the career looks like. The Foreign Service is a lifestyle, not just a profession. And I say that because I think that doesn't become immediately obvious until folks go overseas and they see just how much the life and the work of a Foreign Service officer are enmeshed together. I would really encourage people to look at some of the profiles of what Foreign Service officers are doing and have a good understanding of what the Foreign Service is. And this goes back to one of the questions I think that someone had earlier about what makes where to focus time on the essay, and what are some things that you can kind of guide your candidates in thinking about how to approach the essays. Why the Foreign Service? Why are you interested in becoming a Foreign Service officer? Why now? What about your background and your experiences have led you to the point where you're considering this as a career? And I would really consider having them do a little bit of values exercise in terms of what they see as important for their career trajectory. Is it important for you to have flexibility? Is it important for you to be home and seeing people for weddings, baptisms, and funerals? Because sometimes you will miss those as a Foreign Service officer. Are you prepared to serve in places where you might be isolated, or you may not have large groups of a large community of people, or that it's really expensive to get back home? And type of thing. And the Foreign Service does pay for certain trips home for rest and relaxation. But it's just one of those things that you'll want to talk to them about the sort of realities of what becoming a Foreign Service officer is. It is a really rewarding career. It it presents its own challenges, just like any other opportunity. And we will be conducting several webinars over the course of the summer that will dig in a little bit more to the lifestyle of a Foreign Service officer. So that candidates can kind of see what it is that Foreign Service officers do, and then how that aligns with their personal lives. We talk a lot about dating in the Foreign Service. I mean, people think that it's funny, and it's like, no, it's actually a really big, like, you got to tell the regional security officer that you're dating someone after three times of interactions. That's a pretty intensive involvement of other people into your social lives, right? but that's a consideration that you want to make as you're thinking about it. And then just one other thing, we're not asking people to know exactly what they want to do. They don't have to mention career tracks in their essays, but we should know that they've done a little bit of research to understand that this is a lifestyle decision and not just a career profession. And it's sort of wrapped up into all of that. And then there was one question about medical clearances, and it's a relatively straightforward one, although the State Department has changed its clearances just a little bit to be more inclusive. The medical clearance for Foreign Service officers is much more in-depth. So they do an entire workup of your whole past health life to determine whether or not you are able to serve in certain parts of the world. There are other there are other countries that just don't have the healthcare facilities that certain conditions might require, especially long-term conditions or chronic illnesses. So they will do a full workup, and then they'll just determine in terms of are there restrictions to where it is that you can serve, or is this something that you will not be able to manage in an international context type of thing. So we will also do a little bit more on providing some guidance on clearances. We have some links on our website that I can certainly guide you all to with questions that often come up with the medical clearances in particular. And then I'm going to stop talking because I think we're about at time, right, Brittany? We're a couple minutes over.
All right. Thank you so much, Nye. Thank you so much, Lily. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. At this time, I would like to invite Nye and Lily to share any final comments they might have before I close out the call.
Just that we appreciate the work that you're doing. You all play a really important role in advising students and young people who are interested in these careers. And thank you for the work that you're doing to get the message out about these programs.
Of course. Thanks for being here today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Joining me, Lily, and Nye for a webinar on the diplomatic fellowship programs administered through Howard University. We have some exciting APSIA advisor webinars coming up this summer, some with Boren and PPIA. I hope y'all are able to join us there. And as I mentioned to Nye earlier today, we have the APSIA Forum for Students and Young Professionals. I'll share the link in the chat. If y'all have any students in the DC area, please feel free to send them our way, and we're looking forward to seeing them on July 13th. I'm going to stop the recording, and thanks so much, everybody.